Hello, welcome to this video. Today I am going to be ranking all of the human species from all tomorrows by what D&D creature type they would be. Um, and so basically all tomorrows is like this book. It's speculative fiction about the future of the human race, right? So, and I'm just, you know, D&D fan. I figured I'd rank these. All right. So first off are the Martians. They were the first people to diverge from just humans as we know them because they lived on Mars. I mean, they're pretty clearly humanoid, so I'm just gonna put them at the top here. Um, right. And so now next, we got the Star People. That's when the Martians and the regular humans came together to make one species. These are also humanoid by most metrics. Alright, and now we have the Q. The Qs aren't, related to humans at all. They're aliens who came to the Milky Way galaxy and started changing human genetics. They invaded a bunch of planets and just made whatever types of creatures they wanted. I'm gonna say solid aberration for these guys. They're like sort of bug people, so Alright, next we got the worms. One of the creatures that the Q created were called the worms. They were basically just very dumb humans that were about the length of a human arm who really only understood food and friend. This is a tough one. I think I'm probably going to have to say monstrosity. Although, yeah, monstrosity should probably be good. Okay, next we have a titan. Titans were just sort of like elephant people that were able to sort of exist like that as an elephant person. And, like they grew like a sort of lower lip so that they could better pick things up, be tactile. And I'm gonna say that these guys are definitely a beast. Because they're very animalistic. And I think I'm gonna change these guys into an ooze. I'm gonna change the worms into an ooze just because, they have low sentience and they have sort of like that whole ooze thing going on, I guess. Alright, next we have the hunters and the prey, which are both beasts because, they're just different species of human who sort of hunt each other on, well, the hunters hunt the prey on their planet. They're more animalistic. They're sort of just like jackal sort of creatures. Yeah, next we have the mantelopes. The mantelopes are humans that retain sentience, like the titans, except they eventually lost that sentience because it was less advantageous to have that sentience because it was a bigger brain that they had to support. These are gonna have to be beast for me, like if you look at them. Uh, okay. Next are the swimmers. Um, these are just like pretty much just like dolphin shark people. They're gonna have to go beast for me. Right. So now we have the lizard herders. The lizard herders are just like kind of stupid humanoids who lived off of lizards. Um, and yeah, humanoids. Exactly what they would be, I would imagine. Um, alright, so next we have ourselves the tempters, right? tempters are basically the females would root themselves into a place and have the males do whatever they wanted for them, and so they're definitely strange looking. I'm having trouble deciding whether monstrosity or aberration, but I'm gonna decide upon aberration. Alright, so next we have got our bone crushers, right? The bone crushers basically are a type of people who ate the corpses that other animals would leave behind, ate the corpses of their relatives, and they stood at 3 meters tall, and so I think that's a solid indication that they fit squarely into the giant category, right? Yeah. Next we have the colonials. The colonials basically they were pretty successful at repelling the Q, but eventually the Q were able to subdue them, and for their fighting back in the Q sense of justice, they decided to sort of sew all of these creatures together. And so I'm gonna say monstrosity because they're sort of like a gibbering mouther. Yeah, like sort of like how the Q are sort of like mind flayers and they're creating creatures and sort of all that sort of stuff. I'm gonna say the monstrosities are sort of like the gibbering mouther and that they're a bunch of singular creatures sewn together. Next we've got the flyers. The flyers are just they were decently intelligent and they were humans who were able to start flying. I'm going to have to just say humanoid. I think they're probably more Arakaka than they are seal or pterodactyl, so that's probably going to fit more humanoid than it is going to fit as a beast or something like that. And after the flyers, we have the hand flappers. I'm not too sure where I should put the hand flappers. They're sort of just like creatures who couldn't fly. How the flyers could fly, the hand flappers couldn't fly, and so they sort of just like used their wings to do mating dances. I'm just gonna put them by humanoid. They don't really seem to fit with any of the other stuff. Alright, so next are the blind folk. The blind folk basically, as would imply, they're just people who lived underground, who were blind, who sensed more with their whiskers and their sense of smell than they did by seeing things. I'm gonna have to say humanoid for them. They're pretty humanoid to me. I mean, alright, so now next we have the lopsiders. The lopsiders, they lived on a planet with 36 times Earth's gravity, so they kind of just condensed into a ball, except for this one arm that they would use to catch prey. I'm gonna decide monstrosity for this one. It seems, to fit that general category. The striders, they were very tall humans. They would fit they were very, taller than any of the other guys. So I'm gonna have to say these are giants. Next are the parasites, right? Parasites basically, they got, they feed off of another species of human that basically wanted to fight the Q. They rebelled against the Q, and they got a punishment of having these other little humans sucking their blood and using them as parasites. Um, and so then I'm probably going to have to say that these guys, this is a tough one. I mean, I guess just monstrosity, because monstrosity is sort of just like the catch-all category. If you can't fit it into any other category, it'd probably have to be a monstrosity. But maybe a fiend, though. Because, you know, the whole thing about fiends is that they're like trying to, you know, they're like the devils and demons trying to feed off of human souls. This is sort of similar. It's, you know, there's no real souls in this, but this is the closest thing you'd probably get to a fiend. Right, so now we have the finger fishers. Finger fishers are just sort of like people who would go and eat fish on their home planet, and they spread across the coast. You know, humanoid, I guess. Next we have the hedonists. The hedonists just lived on like a paradise planet. They had no predators, they had plenty of food, and they lived like that pretty just peacefully. They never had anything to want. They always just, you know, enjoyed their lives, basically. Let's see. Probably just humanoid. I don't see any reason to put them anywhere else. I mean, well, they are kind of freaky. I don't know. Humanoid or monstrosity, but humanoid. They were more humanoid. Next we have the insectophagi. They were just like guys who ate insects. Again, probably just humanoids. And now we have the spacers. The spacers, they sort of used their, you know, they were able to successfully escape the queue. They didn't ever get captured by the queue, and so they lived in like low gravity places, which caused their body to go kind of weird. And they were very smart. And you know, they in ways are sort of like the queue, so I'm gonna have to put them by aberration. They're sort of like, you know, like the megalomaniacal sort of mind flayer thing you got going. And so then you also have your sorry. Then you also have your rune haunters. Rune haunters were put on the planet by, and more cues were put on there. And they were able to evolve intelligence and sentience pretty quickly, and so eventually they were able to decipher the ruins of the star people and gain knowledge from them, and they started like replicating their technology and stuff. Definitely humanoid, very smart but still humanoid. Alright, and so then we get to what are called the post-humans. The post-humans are basically like the evolved forms of all these other creatures, right? And so you have different sorts of, no more explanation needed, I guess. So now we have the snake people. These guys are descended from the worms. And they're just like snake people. I mean, I'd probably have to put them in dragon. They've got that whole reptilian thing going on. Next are the killer folk, which are descendants of the predators. They're still pretty animalistic, even though they're intelligent, so I'm going to have to say beast for these guys. Now we have the tool breeders. These guys basically just, they don't have prehensile hands. They all flippers. They can't pick anything up, and they can't really create fire because they're under the water. So their solution was that instead of making tools, they just breed them out of other animals. They make like bioluminescent animals turn into TVs and stuff. Right, I mean, they're pretty, gonna have to say that they should fit into beast because, they're sort of animal-like. They're also intelligent, but they're like a sort of shark creature. Okay, next we have our Homo Sapiens. The Homo Sapiens are creatures. They, you would think they're descended of the lizard herders, but they're actually descended of the lizards that these herders herded. So they're not really humanoids. They're more lizards. They're not anything like humans. But basically, they're like they started using the lizard herders, the humans, as their sort of vessels, as their animals that they would use. And so the lizard herders are going to have to go dragon because they got that whole reptilian thing going on. Okay, the modular people. The Colonials eventually evolved. They were filter feeders left on the planet, basically just as scrap. And so they eventually evolved into something called the modular people. The modular people were, sort of just a colony of a bunch of these individual thinking humanoids, I guess, who went around. They all looked different, and every organ, each human would have to basically function as one of its organs. Right. And so now I'm going to have to put it in the aberration column. It's I'd say it became less like a gibbering mouther and more like something that you'd see out of the far realms in D&D. And so then after that you have the Homo Sapiens. Sorry, the Terra Sapiens, my mistake. These guys, they were just flying creatures, They came from the flyers, and they sort of, they're flying creatures, but their heart wasn't able to keep up with both their flying and their brains, so as a result, they live very short lifespans. Only about, 22 years until they reach old age and die. I'm going to say dragon for these guys. They're sort of like dinosaur-like, like a dragon. And now we have the Lopsiders. The Lopsiders are descendants of the... Oh yeah, if I didn't mention it, the Terra Sapiens are descendants of the Flyers, but the Lopsiders are descendants of... Sorry, the asymmetric people are descendants of the Lopsiders. And so I'm going to have to say, if we're bringing this guy up here, that the Lopsiders would probably still be in the monstrosity column. They can move better. They can move on land now instead of being resigned to water. But, they don't really look or act all that much different other than being intelligent from the Lopsiders. So the asymmetric people are still monstrosities. Alright, this one's going to be a tough one. This next one is the symbiotes. They're descendants of the parasites, right? And so basically their whole thing is the parasites started being in a symbiotic relationship. They started working with the other sort of creatures that they were mooching off of originally, that they were being parasites for. And so they would basically take over the bodies of these creatures and steer them where they wanted to go. They might have a work body and then a home body, and they would get into their bodies basically and control the bodies like a machine. So it was sort of like a living machine for them. And they're kind of similar to the tool breeders in that way. This one's a tough one, but I'm going to have to say monstrosity. That's just sort of like the category. When you can't fit something into a category, you put it as a monstrosity. Okay, next is the sail people. Sail people are the descendants of the fingerfishers, right? They basically just, they're chilling, they sail out into the ocean. They look a lot more like they look a lot more like beasts than their fingerfisher friends did, than their fingerfisher ancestors did. So I'm gonna have to put them in the beast category. They're a lot more. They look more animalistic, even though they're much smarter. Uh, I think the point of the book is trying to say that like life doesn't really need to be bipedal in order to be intelligent. And so that's why a lot of the, even though beasts in Dungeons and Dragons are considered like not very intelligent, these guys would be intelligent and they'd be very beast like. Um, right. And so then we've got ourselves the Satyriacs. They're descendants of the hedonists. Basically, their paradise planet uh, wasn't so much of a paradise anymore. There was a lot of environmental problems going on, and so that sort of forced them into a sort of reptilian-like body. They still know how to have a good time though, and I'd say they're dragons. You know. Next we have the bug facers. These are the descendants of the insectophagi. The book just tells us basically they're sort of like just xenophobic in general. They don't do very well with other sorts of people. Um, and I think I'd probably put them in the aberration column. Just because of the whole mind flayer thing. Mind flayers look humanoid, but they're more aberrationist, aberrative, I guess. Um, yeah, they have a very strange face, and they would. Yeah, I guess that's just aberrations for you. Okay, now we have the Asteromorphs. These guys are the descendants of the Spacers. The Spacers just basically used eugenics to make themselves the smartest that they could be. They only bred the smart people. I'm gonna say these guys are a celestial. The book goes into detail about how they sort of go around the universe, like watching people, watching the different, planets and seeing what they're up to and trying to protect them and whatever. So, I'd say that's the Celestials. Alright, next are the Gravital. These guys are descended from the Rune Hunters. The Rune Haunters, I mean. Basically, these guys, their whole thing is that they wanted to. Their star was exploding, and they couldn't survive with their flesh bodies. And so they sort of turned themselves into machines. And initially, they had their brains on the inside of these machines, but they, realized that they could replicate their brains with computers. So they said that's what they did, and so they're entirely machine, but they still have the consciousness, and they still have, they still act like, the Rune Haunters would basically. And so they're one of the smartest creatures on here, other than the Asteromorphs, because the Asteromorphs are extremely smart as well, and maybe the Q. Yeah, but basically, these guys, like in the end, they end up trying to destroy all the other species. And I'd say these guys are construct, like they're literally just constructed. They're robot people. I mean, that's as construct as you get. All right, and so now we have the modified bug facers. Basically, the Gravital had a habit of genociding all of the species that they would come across, but the first one, the bug facers, they ended up not really genociding them yet. They would capture them and sort of make them into like grotesque art projects and reconstruct them and make them slaves, and they didn't think it was wrong because they sort of thought of them as lesser creatures. They thought of them as just tools that they could use. And so for the modified bug people, I am going to have to say it's a monstrosity. Monstrosities are usually constructed a lot of the time, like the gibbering mouther, and I think, yeah, like that those types of creatures. They could be constructed by magic or by other means, and so yeah, I'd say monstrosity for them. Now we have the terrestrials. This is also going to be another tough one. Basically, the terrestrials, after... Alright, this requires a lot of backstory. The Asteromorphs and the Gravital sort of had like a Cold War where neither of them wanted to fight each other because they knew it would be a long and arduous war. But then some of the Bugfacer captors, some of the Gravital who had Bugfacer started to feel empathy for them. And so this caused a civil war among the Gravital. And so then after the civil war was over and the colder side won, they said that they wanted another war to sort of stop these people. They wanted another war so that they could get people's minds off of the Civil War. And so they declared a war on the Asteromorphs, and then the Asteromorphs, they fought them, right? And there was a million-year war, but the Asteromorphs finally won, and they said they took like the modified bug people, they took the modified slaves and the different creatures, and they spread them out into the different planets so that they could sort of repopulate the universe. And some of them went down to the Earth. Well, not the Earth, but the planets, the grounds of the planets. And they had to shrink their brain because they were used to being in space and being able to support a big brain in space. So they had to shrink their brain and sort of watch over these new species and make sure that they weren't getting into trouble. And so these were the terrestrials, right? A lot of them ended up being sort of like despotic or whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna have to say maybe sort of like, maybe a celestial again, because the Asteromorphs are celestials. These guys, are just Asteromorphs who are just slightly modified. And then after that, we have the new machines. Basically, when the Asteromorphs conquered the Gravital, they ended up keeping some of them and modifying some of them to help them with remaking the galaxy, basically. And so then these are, basically they're just new machines, so they're new Gravital, so they fit into the construct category. Pretty self-explanatory. And now after that we have the Amphicephali. The Amphicephali, they're sort of like snake people who have they open their mouths and they have a little organism to come out and speak to the rest of the world. I'm gonna have to say it's another aberration. The whole alien thing going on is like a sort of far realms thing, like they're from a far realm. They're from a different galaxy. These aren't humans. They're creatures that humans met and interacted with. They were the first non-Q species that the humans ended up interacting with. And they put this guy at the bottom. He doesn't really or I guess she or they, because I don't know the biology. We don't know anything about these species. There's just a picture at the end of the book while the archaeologist is sort of explaining that humans are now extinct. Um, like, I wouldn't know where to put this guy, but I guess, the whole alien thing is probably just gonna have to be aberration if I had to put him anywhere. Yeah, so that was my list of which creatures are sort of, on, which creatures are different. Yeah. Which of these humans are the types of creatures in D&D? Which types of creatures are these humans in D&D? That was a mouthful. Um, and so if you enjoyed this video, you should probably read the book too. Like, the All Tomorrows is a very interesting book. So I'd say, like, definitely check it out, and I'll see you guys another time. Goodbye.